Welcome, Kevin Bowyer. Wow. You are perhaps best known for learning some pieces very quickly, learning pieces that everybody else thinks are impossible to play, and during your career at certain times seemingly having some incredible stamina as well in terms of the length of performances and the focus that you need. I'm fascinated to discover how your brain works,
Okay.
how this happens, and I guess even we could even start by asking how much it is just a natural gift, or how much is it a craft and a graft?
Okay. Stamina is one word for it. I think obsession is another. I prefer to use obsession. I've always had an obsessive nature. It's one reason I've never got interested in football, for example, because I know that if I did, it would take over my entire life. So I've never allowed myself to do that. But from the obsessive sort of stamina thing point of view, if I've had a big job to do, I've cancelled everything else and just got on with it. And it's always been like that. I've had this sort of one track in my mind to do one thing at a time. And the bigger and the more demanding, the more it's consumed me, no matter what it is. It's bloody mindedness, really, rather than stamina. It's just sheer stupidity and bloody mindedness. That's what it is.
So, as you grew up at a fairly young age, you obviously realised that you could absorb a piece very quickly. And I have heard that one of your particular ways, which is in fact is one of my teaching techniques, is often to work backwards.
Yeah, that's true. I do that with pretty much everything, really, unless the piece is very short. I prefer to start at the end. I have a very specific method of working. I like to work with a metronome in most cases. So I start at the end, I learn the last page up to half speed with my metronome. Then I plug in the page before that, or the passage before that, again with the metronome. There are many advantages in doing that, because if you make yourself play these passages at one uniform speed, the technical challenges become evident very early on, and you can crack them very early on, work out the fingering, the pedaling, and absorb them into the learning stream of the piece. It's served me very well. But again, it's an obsessive thing. It's a purely mechanical learning method that works extraordinarily well. And I found that I can learn pieces very quickly.
Now, of course, it is often a sign of a good professional musician that they do start learning things slowly. And do you find, therefore, that when you're going over things again and again, that in fact, because you've started slowly, you're relatively accurate, and therefore you maintain accuracy consistently? Is that an important part of it?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I don't let myself make mistakes when I practice. I always start at a speed that's slow enough to enable me to play with 100% accuracy, and not just of the notes, but with any articulation that's marked as well. Every detail that is in the score, I learn from day one, from minute one. It all starts right at the start, right at the beginning.
From the minute one, do you have an idea how you want that piece to sound at half speed, even before you actually touch the keys?
No, I mean, unless I've heard the piece already, or there are instances if the piece is short enough that I start by just playing it through to see what's there, or looking it through to see what's there. So I have an idea of the architecture of the piece at the start, and then I begin my technique.
So tell me about repetition in practice then. So you're starting at half speed. Are you then gradually increasing notch by notch as you get it up to tempo? When you are repeating passages, are you repeating them the same? Is it a mechanical process, or do you have a different approach each time?
No, it's always the same. It's always exactly the same. I don't always start at half speed. I sometimes start a good deal less than that, depending on how difficult the piece is. It can be a tenth speed or even less than that. In many cases, it is. If the piece is extremely difficult, it's necessary to start it at extremely slow speeds and build up, yes, one notch at a time on the metronome. Sometimes I play my prepared passage more than once at a particular speed, just to make sure that everything is bedding in. It sounds like a long, dull process. It's a mechanical process, but actually it's surprisingly quick once you're used to it.
Yes, yes. I think it's a system I've used myself as well. Tell me then about expression in organ playing. If it's such a mechanical process, how do you bring the music out from the page, which is only, after all, a representation of really what a composer wants it to sound like, through you or through the instrument to the audience?
How do you do it? Well, music is not music if it doesn't sing. So you have to be aware of lyrical quality in the playing, even from the very earliest stages. I think even when I'm playing very slowly, I'm aware of how the melodies sing, how the lines go together, even in quite complicated music. I find the narrative linear thread very early on, and I hear it singing in my head as I play, even at slow speeds. But how do I put it? How do I put that across to the audience? I suppose it's simply a question of listening to the phrases. I often think of music like as if it were riding a horse, you know, a melody as if it were riding a horse. You have to listen very carefully. Whether you're a listener or a player, you're on the horseback, and the horse is the contour of the melody, and you ride across the countryside, making sure that you hold onto the horse, that you're conscious of the melody all the time. And I think as a musician, if you're aware of how the melody works and how the narrative is taking you across different landscapes in the music, an astute listener is going to follow you there. And I think in my experience, they do.
Right.
Exactly how it.
Yeah, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're saying that you perceive the piece as a journey, and you perceive where it's going as well as the moment you're in, and so you're kind of seeing the direction, and you're seeing the entire landscape, if you like, whilst you are in a moment of time.
In a nutshell.
Right?
You put it so much better than me.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's it. It's knowing the story. It's a story, isn't it? It's a narrative. It's a story that you want to share with the listener. There are no words involved, but it's still a story, nevertheless.
No, and it doesn't need words. It's an international language, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Okay, so with this metronomic practice, of course, a lot of people would say that, particularly with the organ, a lot of people would say could be not very expressive, because essentially when you press a key, you're pressing a switch and turning it on and off. Talk to me about how expression comes through organ playing.
Do you mean the nuts and bolts?
By all means, if you do share us some nuts and bolts. So for instance, you're definitely going to talk with the nuts and bolts with articulation, legato, détaché, all these different kinds of touch.
Yeah, again, in a nutshell, that's it. That's exactly it. In early music, for example, the articulation is important. It's not legato, but however not legato it is, there are still the phrases riding over the top.
Tell me about when it's not legato. Very often, people learn a touch on the organ called détaché, where we get these slight gaps between the notes, so that we hear the consonants almost in the speech of the pipes. What is it that discerns how long these gaps should be? As in, if you mechanically apply the same gap between every note, you actually get a mechanical result. You get the equivalent of Sibelius being programmed to play each note for 80%, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
How does that work for you in terms of applying touch, so that you get a variety of gaps within a phrase that essentially creates expression, because each note has a different degree of articulation?
Okay, yeah, this is primarily to do with early music, but the way I was taught and the way I still feel instinctively, I suppose, is that every beat is detached from each other, and the note groups within the beat are attached or detached in different ways. So if you have a group, say that 4 semiquavers E, C, B, C, the C, B, C would be joined, but the E would be detached from them, and the group would be detached at both ends from whatever's going on before or after. That's a very sort of basic clinical way of putting it. But
okay, so you kind of have a forest, wood, trees perspective. So you have a perspective of the phrase,
Yeah.
and how much you're going to breathe at the beginning and end of the phrase. You have a
Yeah.
concept of the beat, and you probably vary according to which beat of the bar it is. And then
You
you
do?
have another concept for within the beat.
Exactly. Again, I should be paying you to do this interview.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I inherited that from David Sanger, who
Yes,
um, kind of instinctively did it, I think. But I heard what he was doing,
yes,
and he made me read Robert Donington. I don't know if you can still get those books, Interpretation of Early Music, and
right.
that. I read them all the way through and underlined most of the
I think
text.
I think David Sanger was probably one of the first to put this kind of thing into writing in a book for players to learn about.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, with you practicing so metronomically, another aspect of phrasing will surely be the easing of a tempo, or
Yeah.
maybe the opposite. Maybe
Yeah.
you're getting excited, and maybe that tempo wants to speed up a little bit.
Yeah.
How, at what level does that come into your rehearsal? How do you manage that kind of thing?
Okay, mostly that comes into the rehearsal when you switch the metronome off.
Hmm.
You feel the rits and the accels when you're learning with the metronome, and in some instances, it's possible just to sort of forget the metronome for a moment while you practice that section and ride through it with what you want to do with that phrase. That comes in a later stage of preparation, but you're aware of how the phrases breathe and live, and whether the metronome's ticking away or not, you can choose to ignore it for a moment and just carry on and let the music build up, or you can obey the metronome and just say, I know what I'm going to do with this, but I'll do it when the machine is off.
And are these rits and excels the degree at which they change for you? Are they instinctive, or do you have a way of approaching them that you would almost plan and think through?
I have planned and thought through cells and rits, but I think mostly they're instinctive.
Yeah.
You know what the music's going to do. I mean, in later music, of course, they're often written in,
Yes.
so anyway. But there are others where I've instinctively felt that it needs to hold up here, or this group of notes needs more time, otherwise it's going to sound hurried.
Yes. So a
Um,
more lyrical romantic piece, for instance, in which individual phrases are often shaped because there's a sense of slight rubato, the
yeah,
stretching and
yeah,
elasticity of time, and you might want to relax the end of the phrase, but if you relax it too much, it kind of doesn't lead on to the next phrase and breaks up the overall section.
yeah.
Is that all just felt? Is that all? Is it an emotional response? Is it a rational response? Is it both?
It's both. Yeah, it's a musical response. I mean, you know how, if you're going to write that passage in words, you know the words you choose to create precisely the effect that you want, and it's the same with manipulation of tempo.
Yeah.
You instinctively know how it goes.
Some people actually connect it with singing, don't they? They sing the phrase and
Yeah,
try
yes,
and
yes,
respond
yes.
through the voice.
Yes, that's right. I mean, I've always thought of organ playing as kind of singing through the fingers anyway. It's always been lyrical and vocal to me. If it's not music, is it? Not for me anyway. I mean, it has to sing.
Do you ever find that you develop a block between the singing in your mind and your fingers? Has there ever been that challenge?
Did you say a block?
Yes. Is there almost something stopping the connection between your brain and your emotion and what actually your fingers are producing? Or is it always just flowed for you?
I can't think of an instance in which that has occurred.
Okay.
Um, can you suggest something?
Yeah. If you have an emotional idea of how the music should sound, and let's say you're playing a very romantic piece in which there is a greater degree of expression in terms of tempo, and yet when you play that piece, it doesn't seem to come out the way your mind intended it to.
No,
Or is
I
there
can't
so there's
do
just a
it.
natural flow between what you want and what you hear? Do you feel that almost like the instrument's an extension of your body in a way?
I suppose I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've struggled technically with certain pieces. There are certain pieces, for example, that I learned when I was a teenager that I still struggle with.
Right.
now, and those are kind of blocked in a way, and I have to work very hard if I'm going to give a decent performance of any of those pieces, because I learned them too badly and too young,
Right.
and it's stuck.
So, and it's stuck. So when you get a piece that is challenging you, shall we say, um, what kind of mindset do you have in you? Is it the stubborn mindset that gets you through that you mentioned earlier? That obsessive, that I am going to do it and it's going to be the way I want it to be,
Yeah.
or are you somebody who gets frustrated and actually has to manage your emotional response, because that can of course stop us learning effectively?
Okay. I only get frustrated when I have to play music that I don't like, which I have to do sometimes, and then I just feel that it's wasting my time. But I've got to do it because I'm being paid for it. That does
Yes.
happen occasionally.
Yes.
But in the other instances, when I have to perform a piece that I know if I just practiced in my normal way, the performance itself is not likely to be successful, even though the rehearsal sessions might be, because in the performance I return to default, which is not very good. So when I practice those pieces for performance, I find I have to play, well, I make myself rehearse a lot and over rehearse, over prepare, so that I can come
Okay.
down on those pieces of performance and
So,
do a
so
good job.
drawing from that, that says that for Kevin Bowyer, there has to be an emotional connection with the piece for him to play it at his best.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Yes, yeah.
Yes.
And as far as organ solos go, I've rarely played a piece that I didn't like. There have been a few, but they're very rare.
So does that mean when you're learning it, you're actually finding something that you engage with within it as well? If you've got a new piece, let's say it's a very contemporary piece for which you are renowned for mastering some really difficult contemporary works with extremely complicated rhythms or very polyphonic layers with completely different things going on simultaneously, do you therefore seek out something that you can connect with, that resonates with you?
I'm not sure I seek out anything. I find it there. I mean,
Right.
it's there anyway, and I dig it up out of the ground, and there it is, lo and behold. And I appreciate it and love it just for itself.
Okay, so we've got we've started with the piece. We've started it very slowly, and we are playing it at a tempo in which we can only get it right, and we're
Yep.
going from the end backwards, and we're building that, and then eventually we get to the point at which we no longer need the metronome, and then we can perhaps apply some agogic accents or some rubato or whatever, so we've got a bit more tempo. Meanwhile, we've got a concept of where we are within the entire journey and the horizon. Tell me about the final preparation for a performance. Is there a mindset? Is there a process? Is there anxiety you have to work through? Is there not anxiety, but there's a certain, yet again, ritualistic methodology almost that sets you up for that event?
Okay, well, I reach a point at the end of my process where when I can play the piece perfectly with all the nuances that I want.
Yes.
And at that point, it's as prepared as it's ever going to be for performance. I can remember suffering with nerves when I was a boy. I remember very vividly the experience of my first organ recital when I was frightened beyond words. But very soon after that, the nerves disappeared.
Okay.
And I had students coming to me and they said to me, how do I cope with nerves? And I never understood what they meant because I didn't feel nervous myself in performance. I just sort of went and played whatever happened. And then suddenly one day, it was in the Royal Northern College of Music, I went to sit at the organ during a concert and my hands were shaking. And I was so nervous I could hardly play. And I still don't understand why that was. And that has happened 2 or 3 times since. But mostly I don't get nerves, so they don't interfere with the way I play. I mean, technical things go wrong during performance. They always do, I suppose, with everybody. You know, you slip
Yes.
a note and become annoyed with yourself and you have to forget it immediately, otherwise you're going to slip another one. But that's not nerves, that's just clumsiness. And I'm certainly guilty of clumsiness all the time. But nerves, they're something that I still don't know how to help my students with, I think.
Right.
And I think that's failing in me.
Do you think that's, well, maybe it's not. Maybe it's all in the preparation. So I taught the son of a former England football manager, who at the time that he was manager, the team weren't doing very well. And I said to him, well, how do you cope with, all the newspaper articles about this? How do you handle that yourself? And he said, well, firstly, I don't read them. But secondly, he said, it's all in the preparation. He said, if you've prepared the team to their best, then they are going to have to play their best, whether or not they win. And as long as you know you've prepared in the right way, then you can be calm in your own mind. So that's maybe right. With you, it's that preparation and it's that methodology, that consistent methodology that has worked for you. And you go into an event saying, well, I know I've prepared it. I know it. I know I'm ready.
Yeah. That is what I say to the students who say to me, can you help me with my nerves? That's basically it. Yeah, and I think you're right, but I always feel that there must be some secret somewhere that I could hand over to them for £50 and they'd never be nervous again.
I think performance anxiety for many people though is a big issue, because there's that demon at the back of your head that people are judging you, or that they're critical, etc.
Yes, that is true. Yes, yeah. I suffered in recent years. I mean, I didn't know there was a name for this until I found it online. I suffered with imposter syndrome.
Right.
When this is perhaps a bit of a divergence, but in the old days, if you were making a record or something, you made a CD and people put it in their CD player and they listened to it. And now, if you play a concert, the chances are it's videoed and people can see you online.
Yes.
And I was very aware, and I became more and more aware as the new century unfolded, that although I could play, I didn't look the part. And I just felt more and more of a fake on stage, because I still know I just don't have the pizzazz that certain performers have. That sort of bang when they appear on stage. My goodness me, that's a star. I didn't have that sort of visual star quality, and so I became more and more not disillusioned with myself, but more and more uneasy about what I was doing.
Right.
And then I had imposter syndrome, and that's it. That's me.
There are many cases documented, though, of celebrity pianists, for instance, who have been seen practicing, and they practice with a really still body, a very kind of Alexander technique kind of thing. And then when they perform to an audience, all the showmanship comes in, and that's part of the act, if almost.
Yeah, if only I could do that. I could. It's not because I don't want to, it's just because I don't know how.
But maybe that's another a thing with your nerves, is that you're true to yourself. So who's up there is Kevin, and it is Kevin playing, and it's not Kevin trying to be somebody else.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah, and it's it feels as if it's inadequate for me. I wish there was something else, but
maybe that just has integrity. It's just honest.
Maybe I only play the notes. That's all I do.
Fantastic. So you go into the performance, and because you've prepared it, and you're prepared, you're safe in inverted commas, and you can deliver what you want to deliver. You're not anxious about, is this going to go wrong, for instance. Is there a particular aspect of breathing you consider while you're performing? Do you just breathe normally? Is breath important?
Yeah, breath is important. I mean, I sometimes have to remember to breathe as I play, otherwise I get not tense, but I get a bad back sometimes when I play. So I'm concerned about.
Do you kind of hold your breath when it's a really difficult passage, for instance? Is that what instinctively starts happening?
I'm aware there's a danger of that, and I have done that, but I try to make myself relax all the time. It's very important to be relaxed when you play. Posture too. The bigger I've got, I suppose, the more I slouch. So I try to make myself sit up. I consciously make myself sit up, consciously make myself relax in breathing. I play.
That relaxed thing is very interesting, and maybe part of your performance anxiety management without you realizing it.
Yeah.
I had some ISM performance anxiety training, and the person leading it was somebody who'd worked with Olympic athletes. And I'd gone thinking that I could train choirs and make them incredible and drive them to high standards. And I was rapidly corrected that Olympic athletes have the calmest, most focused mindset when they begin a race. They're not highly charged.
Yeah.
They're focused and they're calm, and they're in that calm spot, and then they can deliver their best.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, yes, you have the same kind of thought.
Yeah.
So it's not that you practice particular breathing or practice breathing in a particular way before you start or anything. It's just that you maintain an awareness of what's going on.
Yes, that's true. Yes, that's exactly it. And this thing with athletic, the athletic mindset came home hard to me a few years ago.
Yes.
I'm always learning. I mean, I'll never stop learning in any aspect of what I do. I went to America to play the Sorabji Second Organ Symphony.
Mm-hmm.
And the day before the performance, there was a press interview in which the first question was, so how do you practice then? Do you just practice very hard one day and then have the next day off like Olympic athletes? And I thought, oh God, I wish I thought of that. Would have made that a lot easier.
That'd be great.
No.
So now talk to me about the direction your life has taken now, because actually your new obsession is your novel writing, and of course I know that your novel's been very successful, and I know that where there are historical things in your novels, you research to try and make them historically as accurate as possible, and try to have an understanding and a perception through the eyes of somebody in that day.
That's true, yes. When the first lockdown occurred in, when was it, March 2020? Well, let me go back a little bit before then. For about 4 years before the lockdown, I had this idea for a story in my mind. I wrote stories when I was a teenager. I've always loved writing, but if I could write, that's such a story, if I could write that down and someone on the TV discovered it, I'd make $1 million. I never thought I'd get the chance to write it down. So when the lockdown came along, the day after Boris announced that we all had to stay at home, I remember I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning and I thought, this is it then, I'll go and write it. So I did, and I started. And very quickly, almost immediately, my obsession moved away from music into writing. The narrative thread was still there that I've always been obsessed about in my music, but it channeled away from music into the books. And I did virtually nothing but write for the following 15 months. And in fact, I'm still doing that. Although the organs come back a little bit, and I still play. I play again now. I'm giving a few concerts again now. But yes, the books took over my life. There are 4 out now, and the 5th is half complete.
Brilliant.
Every morning at 6 o'clock, I get up and I start to write, and I write as much as I can.
Fantastic. Kevin,
I love it.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your insight. I hope that lots of people will be able to learn to practice slowly and to practice from the end back to the beginning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Oh.